Hello, I'm Phil Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and in this episode, I aim to answer the question of why you haven't started the project that you've been talking about, that you want, and so forth, right? Now, before I fully get into it, I would like to take the opportunity to invite you to subscribe if you haven't already done so. That way you get all the various lessons and episodes that I put out right when I put them out. Thank you if you just did, and thank you if you already were. It truly does mean a lot to me, as I hope it does to you. So let's talk about this, right? Because I think it's an important question. You know, we want something, we feel we want something, we talk about it to other people that we want it, and yet we don't take that first step. Why? The simple answer is fear, right? But expanding upon that in terms of what that fear actually is, let's take something like writing a book. Right? The idea of having this nugget in your head, it's wonderful. It's fantastic. It's perfect. The problem becomes, you kind of almost inherently know, and you're unwilling to admit it to yourself, that as soon as you sit down in front of the keyboard and start writing, you realize how imperfect it actually becomes, right? Not only through the prose itself, but perhaps the idea is riddled with cliches and so forth. This happens to me all the time, whether I'm writing, in terms of books or screenplays. And this manifests in all the different ways, right? As soon as you have to put pen to paper, proverbially speaking, right? It can apply to painting, it can apply to poetry, to music, filmmaking, acting, anything of that nature, then all of a sudden you allow yourself to be exposed. You're putting yourself out there, and forget other people for a moment. You start to realize, there's what I had in my head, there's a disconnect between what's actually coming through. And that is in some ways a little bit jarring, right? I mean, certainly for me as someone who does a lot of writing, it's, in my head when I think of an idea, it's everything flows, right? It's the most perfect thing in existence. But then when I see it on the page, not so much. And that's where the fear comes in, because we have to grapple with the notion that, what we had isn't exactly as intended. But that's okay, right? Therein lies the crux of it. Because whatever you're doing, it's just the start of it, right? You have to start somewhere, and you refine it over time. With writing, you go through the revision process, and not just once, but twice, maybe 3 times, and so forth, right? As an actor, you rehearse, right? You practice, and you continue shaping and molding and sculpting. Same thing with painting, right? It's not like just the first thing that you ever do, that's it, it's the final thing. You have the ability to, do that, take a step back, and re-examine, be like, okay, how can I make this better? And that's something that we just don't value as a society, really. Back in the day when you were first learning to walk, it's not like you knew how to walk right away on your first try, but you kept going at it until you learned to walk. Now, that's of course a metaphor. If you're handicapped in that way, where you're in a wheelchair or something like that, then yes, it's not the perfect metaphor. But, it applies overall, right? So in this sense, as kids, we almost get beaten out of this idea that whatever we do first time out, it has to be perfect. We don't value the iteration phase as much. And really taking that first step is just to see what the idea is in its purest form as you kind of had it in your head, and then seeing where the pitfalls are. Oftentimes when I work with people that are making a movie and they make their first assembly of, whether it's a short film or an entire feature film, I always say to them, listen, your goal is to just translate what was in the script and what was filmed, so that way it becomes, so you see what was intended. And then you can watch it, play it back, and start to revise it, because, you know, editing is the third rewrite of a movie. And that's how you have to approach all of this. So that's what allows you to take the first step in all of this. That's what allows me to take the first step, you know, from experience, is I don't worry about having perfection at my first go around. I just want to see, I like working at the speed of thought, right? And the speed of thought for me is just, you know, having something and seeing it represented in some form, so then I can go, oh, okay, this works, this doesn't work, here's how we can adjust this, and whatever else. Our minds are naturally really good at criticizing, right? I mean, we're so well versed at it in a way. And so my whole thing is to get to that phase as quickly as possible and let that be the driver for it, right? So, you know, I try to shut off that part of myself for the creation phase and just be as representative as I can, you know, whatever. It's almost like when you have a startup, right? You create a minimal viable product, right? Like, what's the smallest form? What's the version of this? Call it like a prototype, if you will. So that way you can see it and be like, okay, yeah, let's examine and analyze what this thing is so we can move forward. And that is what allows you to take the first step, you know, to get beyond the idea that, yes, the idea that you had has merit, but you won't see if it'll work or not until you start going through it, right? And again, most times the first idea we have is riddled with cliche no matter what it is. And so our job through that process, really, the artistic journey, is to sculpt it, to rid it, and allow it to become unique, as opposed to like everything else. But it starts with taking that first step, and the only way to take that first step is to rid yourself of fear. And oftentimes that first step is the hardest. It's like working out. Once you kind of do it and get in a groove, you can do it. So take the pressure off yourself. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect right out of the gate, because you have the chance to fix it. So I hope this helps you. As always, if you have any questions or thoughts of your own, please comment down below or hit me up on social media at Svitek. Would love to converse with you and help you out in any way that I can. Thank you. I appreciate you, and I hope to see you next time.